Hi and welcome to this video. In this one, we are going to talk about useRef versus useState. So hit that subscribe button and let's get started. Now, before jumping and talking about useRef and useState, we need to take a look at what it is that we want to do in this video. So we have a very simple stopwatch right here, and it has three buttons. We have a starting button that is going to start. On the far right, we have milliseconds. In the middle, we have seconds. On the left, we have minutes. We have the option to stop the stopwatch, and then we can resume it from where we stopped it. And you can see when we stop it, the text for start changes to resume. And we can reset the stopwatch as well. So if I set it to reset, we can see the start is now showing again. It was resumed, now it is start. So this is the functionality. Let's take a look at our code. As usual, you will find this starter template right here, where we have all the markup along with all the Tailwind classes and some static data. All right, so that's the starter template. And what I've done is I've copied that and pasted that here. Now, we are going to have a main that is going to be a wrapper for everything. We have an h1, that is the title. And then the paragraph is going to be responsible for showing the actual counter right here. So this paragraph is responsible for that. We are going to run a function that is called format time, and we are going to pass a variable or an argument that is called elapsed time. How much time has been passed? On every button, we have a specific on-click event. On this one, we have a start stopwatch. We're going to define these functions. Don't worry about it. On the second button, we have our stopwatch event, basically click event. On the third button, this is the reset. We're going to call an on-click, which is going to be a reset stopwatch. So we have start stopwatch, stop, and reset. We're going to define all these three functions as well. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. Now, what is it that I'm going to do here? First, you need to know what useRef is. So useRef is another hook like useState. It allows us to grab a feature from React, and what it basically does is it remembers values between renders. And when it does that, it doesn't cause a re-render of our application, as opposed to useState. If you were to remember two different values, you need to update the UI with the new value. Hence, we call it a re-render of the UI. But useRef doesn't re-render, all right? So what is it that I'm going to do? First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function that is going to be start stopwatch. Now you need to keep in mind that there is a couple of functionalities that we need to borrow from pure JavaScript. And that is one, we need to have a function. We need to have some sort of a way to run a code every millisecond. For that, we are going to grab the set interval function, all right? And then we need to have some way to clear that as well. And for that, we're going to use the clear interval. Clear interval function. So these two methods, we're going to borrow them from JavaScript, and we're going to use them, all right? They're not actually from JavaScript, they're browser API, but I don't want to make this too complicated. So what I mean is they don't come from React, all right? So what do I want to do in this start stopwatch? Whenever I want to start the stopwatch, what do I want to do? I want to make sure that I'm starting from the beginning, all right? So I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call it start time. And now I want this variable to remember a value. What is that value that I wanted to remember? I wanted to remember the exact starting time. So I'm going to call this ref. This is called ref because we are going to put this inside our useRef. Why? Because useRef remembers values, but it doesn't cause re-render, and that's exactly what we want. Now, whenever you use useRef, it gives you one object with one property, and that is current, right? So how do we calculate how much time has passed to get what the starting point is. We have an object which is called date. So if I say date.now, this is going to give me the now, exactly what this time is, but it's going to be in milliseconds. And I'm going to subtract that from how much time has passed since the counter was started. So elapsed time. Now keep in mind, when it comes to the elapsed time, it is going to be changing. So if elapsed time is 10 seconds, how much time has passed from when we started? That's 10 seconds. It could be 11 seconds, 12 seconds. So this is something that changes. And when this changes, our UI is going to change as well. This means that this is going to be a useState, right? So let's go above. Let me get rid of these two. We're going to come back to them. So I'm going to call our useState first. So what do I want to do here? Now, I want to make sure I know how much time has passed. Why? Because every millisecond, I'm going to update the UI. See? So if you take a look at the UI, you can see we are updating the UI every millisecond. So that's a very good use case for useState. Now, how much is it going to be initially? Initially, it's going to be 0. All right. I'm going to type annotate it to a number. I don't have to, but I want to make sure that you know that this is TypeScript, right? And what useState is going to give us is an array with exactly two things inside of it. One is going to be the state variable, right? So the state variable is going to be elapsed time, and then there is going to be a setter function to change the state variable's value to something else. So set elapsed time, and then we store this. We can just call it const or let, doesn't really matter, right? So far everything's cool, but we need to put this inside a useRef as well. Now, why don't we use start time with useState? Because useState causes a re-render, and that's not something that we want. We want to remember a value, but don't change the UI. We just want it to be behind the scenes, all right? So here I'm going to write useRef. Now, we need to import this as well. So as soon as I hit enter, it's going to import it. We're going to come right here, and I'm going to remove the last E, and I'm going to add it again, and I'm going to hit enter. It's going to import useState as well. So useRef. useRef's initial value for our starting time is going to be 0. That's very cool, right? And it gives us an object with one property. We're going to grab the object itself. It's going to be start time ref. Let me capitalize this one. That's it. And then we could call const or let, doesn't really matter here, right? So far everything is making sense. We created this because we want to start from 0 whenever we load the component the first time on the initial mount, or when we hit the reset button. We need to start from 0, right? Now, what is the method that is going to change the UI every millisecond? It is set interval. We talked about that, right? So set interval. This is going to change the UI every 1 millisecond. What do we want to do here? It's not going to accept any arguments in this scenario. We're going to grab our set elapsed time. Why? Because initially the elapsed time is 0. And then we need to set it every 1 millisecond. We need to change the elapsed time every 1 millisecond. We need to increment it. So we're going to grab elapsed time. Remember, this is the setter function for our elapsed time, right? So it changes the state variable with a new value. And during this process, it updates the UI as well. That's why we use state. We use useState. So here, we're going to grab our current time, date.now, and then what is the starting time? Well, I got that right here, right? So I'm going to put that right here as well. So this is going to run the function every 1 second. Now, I want to store this as well, but I don't want to cause a re-render. Why? Why do I want to store this? Because take a look at this. We are at 3 seconds and 50 milliseconds. So I want to be able to, when I say stop, to see that value. Perhaps I want to resume from that value, which I do right here. So if I don't store this value, I won't be able to resume from it as well. So if I resume, it's going to start from that 350, and now it's 471. I resume from that point. So we need to put it somewhere so we can resume from that point. And I'm going to put it in something called, you could come up with these names on your own, interval ref. And it's going to be a useRef, but it is going to give us a property that is called current. Why? Because I want to remember it, but during this process, I don't want to cause a re-render. Now, why do we need this? Why can't we use regular good old JavaScript variables? Is because during renders, JavaScript variables are going to be rendered as though they don't have any value. So you could give like dynamically a JavaScript value, a value of like 5 seconds. But when when React's useState re-renders this component every 1 millisecond, it will never have time to have updated that. So every 1 millisecond when the component re-renders, its value is always going to be 5 seconds. It's not going to be 5.1. It's not going to be 5.2. It's always going to be 5 seconds. All right? I mean, it's not even going to get to 5 seconds. It's always going to be 0. Because JavaScript variables don't have the ability to remember information when the component re-renders. They don't have that. That's why we use React. React does that. That's why these frameworks are created, because vanilla JavaScript can't do it. And if we were to come up with some way to do it, that would be an imperative way, like do this and this and this and this and this, like step by step. But you can see, I just tell React what to do. What it does behind the scenes, that's not something that I want to concern myself for this video, all right? But this is called a declarative approach to programming. So what I mean by this is I specify the end goal of what I want, and then what happens behind the scenes. React might run 1,000 different lines of code to give us this functionality. That's why it's easier to work with frameworks than the actual vanilla language, because the language you have to write everything by hand. And trust me, when they created React, they did all of that by hand. So now we have this functionality. All right? So here I'm going to create another, come on, buddy, useRef, and I'm going to call it interval ref. We're gonna grab, I'm not gonna grab the current. The current is always going to be on there. So useRef. I could type annotate this, all right? I'm gonna come back to this type annotation now. When we say interval ref, right? What is interval ref? Interval ref stores the value of how much time has been passed. And then we might need it for resuming, or we might need it for basically starting from that point and going onwards, all right? But what is it initially when we mount the component? What is it? It's going to be 0, all right? Now, the thing here is that it could be 0, it could be null, because you might mount the component, but the user might never click on anything. So at that point, we don't even know if we're going to get a number or not. So initially, it's null. So I'm going to type annotate this to number and then null. So we don't get any errors by TypeScript. We don't want it to yell at us. So far everything is perfect, right? Cool. Let's come here. We don't see anything because we still have like 4 different kind of errors. We need to have this format time function. So let's go ahead and let's create that function. Now the idea of this function is to basically allow us to format our time. So what do we want to do? Now this, what I'm about to write here, this is pure JavaScript. It's not React. It's just some simple programming. So we are going to pass some time to this, all right? The time is going to be of type number. So far everything is cool, right? Now, we need to grab minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. So I'm going to have const minutes. And then I could have seconds and milliseconds. So seconds and then milli. Is it double L or 1L? I think double L. Milliseconds. All right. So let's apply all 3 of these. So for minutes, we are going to grab our floor method on the math module, all right? And then if you grab the time that has been passed, now keep in mind, the time that is going to be passed to the format time function, it's always going to be in milliseconds. So the way you convert it to minutes is you divide it by 60,000. That's perfect. So far that's done. Then we floor, because we want to end up with a round number, right? And it's better to floor it than to seal it. If you were to grab the remainder using the modulo operator, the remainder of 60,000, and divide that by 1,000, you're going to get the number of seconds. This is like a simple thing. I don't want to jump into like math. So the modulo is going to give us the remainder, all right? And then we divide that remainder by 1,000. It's going to give us seconds. Why? Because this is how you convert from milliseconds into seconds. And finally, we just want to grab our milliseconds, and we want to, now, we're going to have like a big number when it comes to milliseconds. In fact, I could show you right now. So if I were to log something, let me come to here. So if I go to inspect, console log, here I could say date.now. Let's call this. Oh, sorry, it's date.now. You can see this number. This is a very big number, right? And this is all milliseconds. Even though this is like this big, I just want 2 digits from this for milliseconds. See, I just want 2 digits. So we talked about seconds, we talked about milliseconds, but for seconds and minutes. But for milliseconds, I don't want it to be like 15 or 16 characters. I just want it to be 2 characters. So to be able to do that, what we are going to do is we're going to grab our math.floor, because we want the floor method and it is on the math module. Whoops. So that's why we need the math. We are going to grab our time. However, it is remainder of it. We're going to multiply it by 1,000. Sorry, the remainder of that using the modulo operator, 1,000. And then if I divide it by 10, this is going to give me only 2 digits of that. And remember, here we want to show some numeric value. Let me get rid of that. Numeric value here. We want to show that. So we are going to say return. Now here I'm going to do a formatted string. And let's grab our template literal. So what do I want to show? I want to show minutes. Now I'm going to convert everything to string. It's that way it's easier to actually show to the window. To string. And now, how many characters do we want there to be? We want there to be 2 characters for milliseconds, for minutes, and for seconds. So I'm going to say pad start. This is going to make sure that there are 2 characters, but in case there is nothing, we want to show a string of 0. Everything is cool, right? So 2 characters, if there is nothing, which means the component just got mounted, we are going to show 0. Everything is cool, right? And then we separate using a colon. Let me copy this, put it right here. So next up, what do we have? So next up, we are going to have our seconds. And we are going to say seconds to string, basically the same thing. And after that, we are going to have our minutes. All right. Oh, I need to close that template literal right here. Sorry for that. And I need to close that right here because we are going to have 3 template literals, 1 formatted string, 3 template literals. Perfect. Let's save that. Let's come right here. I don't think we still are going to see because you can see there is like a gigantic list of errors. Let's see what do we have. Is paused is not defined. I mean, yeah, we didn't define that, right? I could comment this one out for now. What else? What else? Stopwatch is not stopwatch and then stopwatch. Let me comment these ones out. I want to see the UI. So let's comment. Oh, there we go. Perfect. This is our UI. You can see we don't have the text for that. And you can see that the functionality works. We don't have any errors. It starts. We don't have a way to stop it. We don't have a way to reset it. It just keeps on going. There we go. And when you refresh it, it actually stops. All right. So that's the stopping, but the stopping is not yet completed. I'm going to come back to the stopping. There are two more states that I want to declare here, but for now, let's just create the functionality to stop the stopwatch. So here is the stopping of the stopwatch. Let's save that. Of course, everything is going to go to hell again. Let's say function stop stopwatch. What do we want to do here? Now let's see. What do we want to do here? So here, when I click on the stop, what happens? So when I click on the stop, the first thing that happens is the counter stops running, right? Now, it starts running when I click on the start, and it stops running when I click on the stop. And in both scenarios, we change the UI. Remember, we change the UI. So I need some sort of a mechanism to store that for me, so I can reuse that, right? Whoops, use state. So here, what I'm going to do is we're going to start it. We need to make sure that we store when this is running and when this is not running. Initially, when I load the component right here, is it running? No, it's not running. So I'm going to set this to false. A Boolean is going to suffice here. We're going to have an array. Now, what should I pass in the array? What is it that I want to do? I want to basically see whether or not this is running. So I'm going to say is running. Yeah, it is. Naming these is that simple. Just name it what you want. Name it what it does, not what you want. Cool. Now that it remembers that, whenever we load the component or whenever we go to the stopwatch the first time, nothing is running. That's why it's false. But when we click on that start stopwatch, it is actually running, right? So I'm going to say set is running. Here, I'm going to set it to true. Everything is cool right now. But when I click on the stopwatch, the running is going to be false. It's not going to be run anymore. I don't want it to run because I'm actually stopping that. So far everything is clear, right? Now, there is something else that I want to do here as well for the stopwatch, right? So if I come right here, let's reload the page. So if I click on that, it is running. If I click on stop, you can see, even though we're changing the state, since we're not using this is running, it's not actually making any difference right here. So we need to come up with another state that is going to handle the pausing functionality for us as well. Now, when we stop, make sure we don't want to stop and start from the beginning, like reset the counter. We just want to pause it right there. So here I'm going to say use state. Initially, this is going to be, again, set to false because initially it's not paused, it's not stopped, it's not run, it's not reset, it's initial state. So it is going to be false. And then the naming for this is going to be simple as well. We're going to say is paused, and then set is paused. There we go. Set is paused. So far, everything's clear, right? So whenever we run the function, this means it's running whenever we run, but it is not paused. So set is paused is going to be set to false. But when we stop the stopwatch, what is this going to be? This is going to be true because we just stopped the stopwatch, right? All right, so everything is making sense so far. We can run this, but we can still stop it. Now, the reason that I did these two states is actually for us to be able to disable these buttons. You can see if I click on, before clicking on that, you can see the stop is disabled. When I click on start, the start is disabled. Now, when I click on stop, stop is again disabled. So let's go ahead and let's implement that functionality first. We have our stopwatch here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say disabled. This button should be disabled when the counter is not running, right? When the counter is not running, we want this to be disabled. So when is running is false, we want this to be disabled. All right, but what about the starting button? What do we want this? When do we want this to be disabled? We want this to be disabled when the function or the counter is actually running. Let's is running. There we go. Now, where do we want to use as paused? We want to make sure if you remember, I commented this out, and that's why this doesn't have any text. If the counter is paused, we want to say resume, otherwise we want to say start. So let's save this. Let's refresh the page. So you can see on initial mount, the stop is disabled. I could click on this. The stop is enabled. I could click on the stop. Now the counter is not stopping. We're going to come back to it. You can see we get the resume. I could resume again. I could stop again. I could resume again. And I can't reset. The reason that this doesn't work, remember I talked about two things during the first minutes of this video. One was clear interval, set interval. The second was clear interval. So we need to come up with a mechanism to clear our interval, right? And that is again JavaScript. And I'm going to put it right here. So I'm going to create a function that is going to be called clear interval. Now, since we're clearing the refs, remember, now the value for the counter is stored in the ref for next render of the component, but it's not changing the UI. So I could call it ref, right? This is not going to accept anything because we're just clearing stuff out. Now we need to do a conditional. Why? Because we want to see if a value is not null. So if the interval ref dot current is not null, this means that the counter has run. Remember, initially it's null, but then when the counter runs, it's not null, which means it could be a number. It should be a number. When it is run for some time, we want to clear the interval. Remember, this function is not coming from React. Right? And what do we want to clear? We want to clear the interval ref dot current, right? So since it's not null, it's a number, we want to clear that. And we also want to clear this from memory as well by setting its value to null, all right? By setting it to its initial value. So I'm going to copy that, put it right here, and I'm going to reset it to its initial value, which is null. Now we have this function. We need to start using that. So I'm going to copy that, come to Stopwatch. I could go on top or on bottom, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to put it right there, and I'm going to save this. Let's refresh the page. Start, stop, resume, stop. Perfect, right? The only thing remaining is this reset. So the reset is right here. It's on the reset stopwatch. And let's put it right here. The reset is going to be the simplest of all of them because we reset everything, stopwatch, to its initial state, right? So the first thing that we need to call is our clear interval ref, right? The second thing is that we need to set is running to false because, of course, we don't want it to run. What else do we want to do? We need to set is paused to false as well. Remember, everything is going to be a reset. All states is going to be a reset in here. Now, why don't we do this in stop? Because we want to start from that's where we stopped it. Because that is not actually stop. That is like a paused state, right? And then I'm going to grab the elapsed time and I want to make that 0 as well. So set elapsed time, set it to 0, save this, refresh the page for a clean slate. Start. It's running, let's say, second 4. Resume. Starts from there. Reset, resets it. Now, the thing with reset is it's not disabled. So if you take a look at the button itself, it doesn't have a disabled attribute because it doesn't matter if it is running or not. We could always reset it. See, and it goes back to its initial mounting stage. So whenever you reset the counter, it looks like it starts when we actually first mounted the component. All right, so that is it. See you in the next one.